Chapter 3 The Kabuki House Drama. Why did it have to be in Yamato? In any other city, I could have escaped and been well on my way downriver before morning broke. Never thought I'd miss alleyways you had to squeeze through sideways or sewers you had to trudge through knee-deep in muck. But this was the home of the Imperial Palace. There were no alleyways that could not fit 5 armored soldiers abreast, and no underground waste tunnels either. Instead, royal shit was carted off discreetly. Their feces was high prized as night soil and sold to the highest bidder. I wish I was joking. The kid was upset with me, but the feeling was mutual. There was a lot Mitsumi and I needed to discuss, not least of which was the miniature tornado she turned up back there. I know I encouraged her, but after standing in the eye of that twister, a pain grew in my gut, and I don't think it was from the fish either. It was fear. A Shujinja using magic against a samurai was going to make more than just a gossip over tomorrow's morning miso soup. It was going to scare people. Rich people. The wealthy live in a world that has so little to be afraid of, so when something out of the ordinary happens, they line up and throw money at the problem. Money in the form of bounties, increased patrols and shakedowns at every gate out of the city. While there were paper lanterns at every street corner, Yamato was a ghost town at night. This may be due to a curfew, or a simple lack of disreputable fellows like me about. Either way, guards are sure to find a man skulking around with a girl at midnight questionable. I need a strategy should we come across these patrols. I'll let my wooden sandals get me out of it. Finesse has increased. My career has been one life-endangering job after another. The reason I've been able to stubbornly persist for as long as I have wasn't due to my quick wit or sword technique. It was because I knew how to turn tail and run, fly the coop and sprint like a bat out of hell. However, if you want to say it, I'm fast. Kid, run away if you see any guards. I'll grab their attentions and I'll give them a slip-in in a foot race. After that magic show at the Sleeping Duck, Mitsumi had a huge target on her back. A huge bounty too. But with a colorful swordman and even more colorful language, I was confident I could buy this kid enough time to escape. She didn't seem to like the proposal. Unacceptable! It has come apparent to me that I bear the burden for our collective morality, for you have none of your own. I can't leave you to your own devices. Mitsumi brushed her bangs from her eyes to reveal a stern glare. Her cheeks puffed out as well, a childish but incredibly cute habit. And I wasn't sure how to deal with this cuteness. The kid's frustration gave way to an idea, one of her better ones. It's obvious to me that we have matters to discuss. This establishment across the street with the posters on display. It should be deserted this time of night. I followed Mitsumi's eyes as a series of large illustrations hung over a wooden building. The illustration showed ridiculous-looking men and women in white face paint and impossibly colorful kimonos. Me and my orange harori should fit right in. The front entrance was unlocked and slid right open. Hyuga doors were impossible to secure from the outside. The best you could do is place a bar from the inside to prevent the frame from sliding altogether. Most folks from safer communities didn't even bother, which certainly made my assassinations easier. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it sure wasn't this. Balconies overlooked a series of raised walkways, which mingled in and around seating areas covered in luxurious rugs and pillows. The walkways joined towards the end of the chamber, where some sort of miniature shrine stood in an extravagance. It lacked any walls and any purpose, from what I could tell. My puzzlement didn't go unnoticed. Care to speculate, Okami? I knew Mitsumi was grinning like a childish devil without even looking. Since our 2 weeks of traveling together, she's made a habit of boasting her trivial knowledge whenever and at all possible. Sometimes I could get lucky on a hunch. Probably not this time, though. It's a waste of money, whatever it is. Stoic has increased. It's a waste of money, whatever it is. I didn't want to give the kid the pleasure of flaunting her mountain of useless knowledge. This place reeked of perfume and fat nobility, which is evidence enough that it's a waste of both time and money, both of which I need much more of. Mitsumi's lecture begins without warning, with much more enthusiasm than I expected. This is a kabuki theater! Stylistic dance dramas in its purest form, genius calligraphy depicted in historic battles and romance, warring families and forbidden love, legends that speak the spirits themselves. Her passion bled through her words. Mitsumi continued on about particular actors and plays she has seen, the masks they were and the methods that they used. I tuned her out and returned to my own thoughts. Apparently scrolls weren't the only thing that this Shujinja obsessed over. Must be nice to live in such a leisurely life, to enjoy distraction so intensely, to be a hopeless romantic. It was a luxury guys like me couldn't afford. The best course of action was to hide out here for a moment while guards prowled the nearby streets. It gave me and the kid a chance to talk, but not about clowns who dance with masks on. Matsumi Hashimoto, you and I have much to discuss. This was the first time I ever addressed her so officially. Names hold a certain power, but only if you use them sparingly. Like a spice, they can change the flavor of a sentence entirely, and this dish was tasting bitter, but the matter had to be addressed. I am your bodyguard. You tried running out on me while I slept. Why? My eyes met hers and I prepared for a stare down, but that wasn't necessary. Her eyes looked away towards the front entrance, as if willing the body to follow. Why was she so desperate to avoid the question? Mitsumi's hands clenched into fists. Worried that I would abscond your payment? Of course! That's all you ever seem to care about! She pulled out a pouch from the inside of her kimono and slammed it against the stage floor. The jingle of coins proceeded to scatter over the row, the shining glints of gold unmistakable even in the faint light. There, take your row, you scoundrel! The Shujinja turned away from me, shoulders that raised with rapid breaths. She sniffed the air, though not to catch a scent. Mitsumi was holding back a cry, and it was entirely my fault. My job is to worry about you. Protective increased. My job is to worry about you. I won't pretend the money didn't matter, because I came from a world where it was all that did. But I was first and foremost a professional. There's not much a wandering ronin has to his life to be proud of, besides a full stomach and a job well done, which makes me 1 out of 2 so far. Mitsumi didn't reply, so I continued. You're from one of the wealthiest families in Hyuga, and I'm not. We don't have the same interest. Hell, we hardly speak the same language. We'll never be friends. That last word came out weirdly. That's because it was a weird word to begin with. I knew what friends were, I just couldn't remember the last time I had any. This time the young woman in the red kimono did reply, though her back still turned. 2 weeks we've traveled together, yet I scarcely know your name, let alone your hobbies, so how can you deserve such a claim? Mitsumi spun on her heels to face me, with her anger more composed than before. How can I permit you to be my protector if you won't even tell me who you really are? Who I really was? I was exactly what you think, a no-good, vagrant swordsman for hire. Or maybe she wanted to know about my past as a street urchin who stole from hard-working farmhands, who beat up on smaller kids until they bruised all over for a fistful of stale rice. Or maybe she wanted to know about the ungrateful student of a sympathetic samurai, who betrayed his master for a bit of chump change, forsaking the man who is the closest thing to a father he would ever have. What a horrible human being. My life made for a piss-poor story no Kabuki house would want to dance to. Mitsumi had the curious mind of any good scholar, but this was one tale she wouldn't want to hear. And aside from that, she'd never see her apricot ronin the same way again. You keep asking about me like that, kid, and a guy might start getting the wrong idea. Perverted has increased. You keep asking about me like that, kid, and a guy might start getting the wrong idea. I playfully wink and tease Mitsumi out of the dangerous line of questioning. I couldn't satisfy her curiosity, but I could distract her imagination in other ways. The kid didn't know it, but the less she knew about the vagrant ronin, the better. I'd rather she think me as a shameless flirt than a heartless killer. Though, I certainly fit both roles. Although the Shinjinja looked shaken and embarrassed, she gritted her teeth and stared me down with a determined look. Flatter yourself as you may, I will not be dissuaded. Her gaze intensified, and it was my turn to look away towards the door. I might have underestimated the kid's resolve, or I might have just had to step up my game. Either way, I played to win. I was about to follow up on the original question when Mitsumi barred me with queries of her own. While I was glad that they weren't about my past, they were about as pointed as razor-tip shuriken. What was your opinion on my formidable display of expertise back there? Were you able to appreciate the majesty and harmony between the spirit and our physical realm? She almost looked like she was bouncing up and down in excitement. Skittish, like she poured an entire jar of sugar into her afternoon tea. Apparently, my apathetic shrug was not the reaction that Sumi was looking for. I forbid you to be unimpressed. Can't you at least pretend to comprehend what you just witnessed? That earlier excitement had turned into a frustrated outburst in a matter of seconds. I had to retain my aloof demeanor for a variety of reasons. The surrealness of that homemade tornado drifted into my mind like a haze ever since we escaped the sleeping duck. I had seen magic before at ceremonies, using it to enlarge the speaker's voice or providing for a spectacular light show. I'd even seen the aftermath of a forest burnt to cinders when the military decided to use Shujinja against ferocious aboriginals. But to see it firsthand, it was thrilling. Impulsive has increased. It was thrilling. The wind at my back caressed me like a lover, while it struck down our foes like a lover scorned. With my katana I could kill a squadron of soldiers, maybe more if they each took their turn. But with the kid's magic she could kill an army. She could carve out her own providence and start a rebellion and challenge the emperor, whereas I was more suited to carving out fish. Life just isn't fair. You did good back there, kid, but I wasn't sure what else to say. Sure, I was humbled by my client's extraordinary powers, but it was more than just that. Don't do it again, not unless you need to. Magic creates as many problems as it solves. They're hunting for a Shujinja now, and will stop at nothing to find you. There was more than one point I wanted to make, but I couldn't bring myself to voice it out loud. If Matsumi started using magic to solve our problems, I'd start relying on her, and I couldn't afford to rely on anyone. I would end up hesitating at that crucial moment, when I held out hope that there was a trick in her knapsack of hers when there really wasn't. That would be the moment I become weak, and the moment I die. Matsumi sighed. I suppose I can't hide it any longer. With shoulders slumped in a display of resignation, she pulled out a letter from her knapsack. But what drew my attention was the giant red seal atop it, a wad of dried wax that revealed a geisha's lipstick. The stamp of official documents weren't uncommon, but this one was in a league of its own. Well, go on, read it. The kid hassles me onward. Sweat drips from my brow, and it wasn't from the humidity. I looked down at the elegant lines of chicken scratch. Shit. This guy's handwriting's too sloppy. What's it say? This guy's handwriting's too sloppy. What's it say? I squint my eyes at the pile of scribbles. While it was true I couldn't read it, the penmanship was hardly at fault here. Matsumi responded by slapping the palm of her hand against her forehead. She then rotated the manuscript in my hand and while shaking her head. Baka, you had it upside down! This calligraphy is both extraordinarily beautiful and easy to interpret. It's obviously from a masterful scribe. I returned my gaze to the letter in vain hope of suddenly being able to understand it, but it would seem that even a master's handwriting couldn't teach these eyes what they just didn't know. No use in delaying it any longer. I can't read. Matsumi gasped in dramatic fashion, catching me to shift uneasily. So what if I wasn't literate? It made this far worse without being an issue. Not every child in Hyuga had access to teachers, especially not ones that lacked parents in the first place. I had been more concerned about my next meal than memorizing silly symbols. Still was. Why was I being so defensive? The Shujinja couldn't let the topic drop. Her mind was still staggered from the fact that not everyone was so well on satirical poetry as she was. Being illiterate is horrendous. There are countless legends to experience, innumerable insight to grasp. By delving into one's imagination, one could vicariously live hundreds of lives. No, thousands! I wasn't entirely sure what vicariously meant, but one life was more than enough for me. I'd rather Matsumi speed up this lecture so she could just tell me why this piece of paper was so important. Save the lessons for when we're out of the city. I want to know why this thing caused you to sneak off in the middle of the night, without your bodyguard. It felt like she had managed to avoid the question for an hour or more, and my voice was starting to grow hoarse from our spirited conversation. This Kabuki house drama was about to end. Failing to enlighten me on the wonders of the written word, Matsumi spoke in a rejected tone. It's a royal summons, Okami. That seal is the Emperor's own mark, and was in our chamber at the Sleeping Duck when I first arrived. It requests my presence at a particular temple, after midnight when the moon begins to decline. This didn't make sense. I made damn sure nobody knew our destination during our 2 weeks of travel to Yamato. I even avoided the main roads and backtrailed in case we were being tailed. And here I thought I was being needlessly cautious, when we've been expected this whole time? The kid's next remark threw my mind into a flurry. It's addressed by a woman named Toshi, though from what you said before, I presume you've already been acquainted? That's right, I told Matsumi about the dishonest bride-to-be. She seemed to have recognized the name. Now I know why. I also knew I didn't want the kid anywhere near the shinobi ringleader. I was feeling several emotions right now. but the strongest by far was being seriously pissed off. This invitation had trap written all over it, more than a Jijinto loan shark. Must I protect you from yourself as well? Drifter has increased. Must I protect you from yourself as well? My exasperated sigh let out my pent-up frustration in a giant exhale. The humid air of this stiff Kabuki theater wasn't doing me any favors, forcing me to remember just how tired I was. We were being hunted in the most highly guarded, most samurai-saturated city in Hyuga. Keeping the kids safe from all that was next to impossible. Especially when she had a death wish. You've thus far only served to endanger me further. What good is an escort who attracts more danger than he dissuades? The words stung because they had a ring of truth to them, but only a ring. Matsumi was oblivious, but on our journey to the capital city, we had passed a duo of pickpockets, a caravan who stole merchandise, and a traveling troop of tramps. Each group had looked at the kid like a hawk did a mouse, until they saw the katana on my hip, that is. I knew enough about my miniature Shujinja to know that arguing any further was a waste of time, and time was a luxury we didn't have much of. We already had spent far too much time chatting. My voice was growing hoarse, and I still had one more question to ask. The question I couldn't help but obsess over ever since we entered the theater. Why didn't you take me with you? I could have sworn my voice echoed against the walls of this empty wooden chamber. It resonated into a delicate whisper, admitting the empathy that I tried so hard to conceal. I was a jaded old man, or at least felt like one, who knew all too well that compassion ultimately led to one misery after another. But I still asked, and I waited patiently for Matsumi to respond. Eventually it came in the form of an embarrassed mumble. Because I wanted to prove that I'm not just some helpless kid. I wanted you to see me as... She trails off into silence, but her words caused me to smile. I pick up a nearby row that was sitting on the floor, and stared at my golden reflection before tossing it back to my employer. You paid for a bodyguard. Might as well get your money's worth.